She was a central figure in Bridgegate. I'm Peter Haskell. Our guest is Bridget Kelly. Last week, Bridget was sentenced to 13 months in federal prison. Bridget, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with, how did you get into this mess?
I didn't believe it to be a mess at first. I mean, hindsight's 2020 now. We're 5.5 years into this, and there's things I would have done differently. But here we are, so I'm dealing. I worked for Governor Christie from early 2010 through early 2014, and here I am.
So Bridgegate involved shutting down some lanes to the George Washington Bridge. Governor Christie was never charged. What was his role in this?
The short answer is I don't know. What I know is that he and I had a conversation about this prior to this study taking place, which is what I believed it to be.
Which he denies.
Correct. And 7 people in court testified that he was aware of this. So, the world started to get strange at one point, when this started to really unfold. But for my knowledge, he knew that the Port Authority was going to be doing a traffic study.
You say you told him there were people in court who testified he knew. How did he avoid charges?
I don't know. But I didn't believe that the traffic study was illegal. I mean, or what they were doing was illegal. So for me, when David Wildstein and spoke on behalf of the Port Authority that they were doing this traffic study, to me it just sounded like something else the Port Authority was doing. David described what they were going to do at the end of this because he truly believed it was going to be successful, and that was to tout the successes prior to Election Day. And to me, that just, again, I'm not a traffic consultant, but he was giving me a heads up, letting me know that we could hear from folks in Fort Lee, but it was, again, it's taken over my life for 5.5 years, but at the time, it was just one of many things that was going on.
So these lanes were realigned, is
Correct.
how it's been put.
Mm-hmm.
And the backstory is basically that the government contends it was political payback to the mayor of Fort Lee for not endorsing the governor. The key piece of evidence was an email that you sent. Time for some traffic problems in Fort Lee. I want to get to that in a second.
Okay.
There was evidence, there were documents, nothing from the governor. How did the governor communicate?
He used his cell phone, a lot of text messages, not a ton of emails, or he'd walk into somebody's office to talk to them. Definitely he texted with staff, emailed me, about innocuous things like Drumthwacket or, the governor's box at the Prudential Center or at MetLife if he had a list of people he wanted to invite, but never anything, related to this, obviously.
Do you think that he was intentionally trying to avoid sending emails about sensitive subjects? Did that happen in your experience with him?
Perhaps. He was a federal prosecutor, so he's probably, knows what is smart to do and not smart to do. But in my, relationship with him professionally, it was really just, I would advise him of things that were going on locally, much like this, and I would take care of invitations and whatnot. So my stuff with him was innocuous, but I think that most of his staff who came from the U.S. Attorney's Office were very careful in what they sent electronically.
So you don't necessarily think that he was trying to avoid a paper trail, or do you think he was?
I'm sure, but not just on this. I think on anything. I
Right.
think he was just cautious.
Let's get back to the email.
Sure.
This was, I suspect, critical in your conviction.
Mm-hmm.
You sent the email, time for some traffic problems in Fort Lee. The government says it shows that you were part of this conspiracy. What is your answer to that?
Poor choice of words and writing an email in terrible haste. If I could go back, I'd write about a traffic study. And I said it in court when I testified. If I had said time for a traffic study in Fort Lee, I wouldn't have been in court. You and I wouldn't be talking. David had told me, with David Wildstein, that there was going to be traffic problems in Fort Lee. Our relationship was very much workplace banter, and I was, trying, or I did, mimic his words, and here I am.
There was a follow-up email, which was perhaps just as damning. The traffic lanes are realigned, traffic is a mess, and you email, is it wrong that I'm smiling?
So prior to that, and I appreciate you asking about it, but prior to that, David in a text message told me that the lanes, that the major arteries, if you will, from northern New Jersey, so there was 12, I think there's 12 lanes, 3 were for Fort Lee, they gave 2 back to
At the
the main
bridge.
arteries, right. And so David had said that the traffic was moving faster. David and most of the men I worked with like to be right. And my response to David, again, was to him being right about this study working. That was it. Unfortunately, it was in the same string about the kids being late for school and everything else. And unfortunately, it looked terrible, and I get that. I absolutely get that.
Here's what the prosecutor said during closings. Her words mean exactly what they say. How do you dispute that?
They're wrong. So they're recounting exactly what those words are. I get it. But they're not talking about what went on in the previous text messages. So the government's going to say that, and I get it, and I sat there and I listened to it for 7 weeks, but that's not what it was. And I'm not sure how they know what my intention was, nor do they know about my conversations with David prior to that. They don't.
No disrespect, but it sounds almost like a tortured explanation. You are, in a hindsight, trying to explain what the words actually say.
No, I'm telling you what they were at the time, and they are now.
In terms of the governor's inner circle, do you think there was a coordinated cover-up, or was it just everybody kind of protecting themselves and circling the wagons?
At the time, I didn't believe so, but as time went on, and I found out more information, through the past 5.5 years, I absolutely believe there was some sort of a cover-up, yes.
Where did that start? Or with whom?
I can't speak and for certainty, but after listening to people testify in court, I would say it started pretty close to the top.
Did it get to the top?
Oh, I'm pretty certain it did.
Is there anything that you have heard up until the trial or since then that can point to something where you say to yourself, Chris Christie knew or was part of it?
Well, I knew he knew because we had a conversation about it. When he started to deny that he didn't know, that's when I started to get a little wary and nervous. And I should have asked more questions. I tried to, and I was not allowed to, basically. I would ask, my direct boss was Kevin O'Dowd, and I would ask—
The chief of staff.
Correct, at the time, yep. And he was going to be Attorney General. The governor had nominated him to be Attorney General. And that now seems like a lifetime ago, but that's what was going on. And I would ask him, like, what's going on? You're good, don't worry. So there's so many things, Peter, that I would say now, like, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. But I didn't at the time. And I was intimidated. It was a tough place to work. I loved it, but it was tough. I mean, the governor was not the easiest person to, when he was angry about something, he let you know, and it was intimidating.
Describe the culture in that office.
So I worked in the legislature for 16 years prior to coming to work for Governor Christie, and so I knew a lot of the legislators. I had met former governors and whatnot, or governors at the time when I was working. So I can't speak to if the culture was any different in other administrations, but it was rapid fire. I mean, he was a rising star. So it was, I think, different. I mean, I remember hearing and people saying, and myself even, we were so fortunate to work for one of the most popular governors in the country, but that was a big deal. And at the time, he was he was the sweetheart of the Republican Party. He was, definitely figuring out how to get things done with the Democratic legislature. So for like a government junkie like me and kind of a nerd, it was exciting. But the culture, when I stepped into the role, Bill Stepien left to go take the campaign manager position in 2013, and I was put in as deputy chief of staff. I saw a different side of the governor. He was very nice to me socially and in the office. But I had a couple instances with him that really kind of scared me in the sense that I was, I just felt very small in a unimportant kind of degraded manner. He screamed at me. He asked me to set up meetings for the newly elected Mayor Steve Fulop of Jersey City. I set up these meetings. I was called by Kevin O'Dowd, his chief of staff, told to cancel each one of them individually. And the next day, the governor came in and he screamed at me about these meetings, and nobody's entitled to a curse word meeting. And you're almost like, wait, we had this conversation. You told me to set these up. And then shortly, the Saturday after the lane realignment, but the weekend of the Seaside Heights fire, he told me to set up this meeting. I set it up with all the business owners, and he asked how it was going to go. We were in an ante room prior to the meeting, and he screamed at me and threw a water bottle at me. What do you think I am, an effing game show host? And I just remember sitting there standing and saying, wait, what's going on? And I'm a single mom of 4 kids. I loved my job, but in hindsight, it's not appropriate.
You tell us a little bit about the governor. What should people know about him that maybe they don't?
He knew about the traffic study. I mean, for me, that's one of the biggest things, because I was painted as this, heartsick, staffer, in the Master Report, which was an $11 million whitewash, if you will.
It was commissioned by the governor to look into Bridgegate.
Yeah, correct. And so the email came out January 8th. That report was out by March 24th. So it took them a year and a half to them, meaning the government, to the federal government, to indict me. But this report was written in like 7 weeks. There was no notes from any of the interviews, and it was $11 million of taxpayer dollars to basically say that I had a broken heart and I shut down the lanes of the bridge. It was absurd. So for me, I think that says a lot about who we're dealing with. And I think the fact that he's, had he just said early on, he, meaning the governor, yeah, I knew about this, this conversation would be so different. But once he started saying he knew nothing about it, that's when the walls started closing in, and I was like, wait, what's happening? So I called him a coward outside of the courthouse. I mean that, because I don't understand why the truth changed.
And I just want to lend some context. You talk about the fact these meetings with the Jersey City mayor were canceled during the trial. That was used as evidence, the fact that it was political payback,
right,
similar to the mayor of Fort Lee, Mark Sokolich. There was a lengthy trial. You're talking about, is there any part of this story that's still untold?
No, I mean, it's definitely, ironically, most people will say he definitely knew. And he did. And I testified to that. 7 others who all got lucrative jobs after leaving the Christie administration testified to the same. I don't think there's anything anybody else needs to know. I just think things need to be highlighted. A lot of people think it's over. I'm going to jail in 8 weeks, prison in 8 weeks, for something I didn't do. So, for me, it'll never be over. I just think it's important for people to understand that I didn't have the power to do this, ever. And it's ridiculous to think that I could have.
You've got the governor, the chief of staff, the chief counsel, the chief spokesperson, you. How do you just describe how your role fits in with all these other people?
I don't. I don't fit in. I mean, except the fact that I knew there was going to be a traffic study, and I told the governor. It was a very, I had a reputation for always having to ask for permission, always having to not doing anything unless I was, told I could. In this case, I advised him of it, and nothing in that office happened without higher ups in the front office knowing. And the folks you mention all were his co-workers in some capacity at the U.S. Attorney's Office. So their history there was a lot longer than Bridget Kelly's history with Chris Christie. And loyalty mattered to him. So
they covered for him.
I think they definitely didn't. I don't know that they covered. I mean, they testified in court that he knew. I don't know that they covered. I think that they were loyal to him.
You know, it's funny you say that. One of the things, David Wildstein was the mastermind of this. One thing that he testified in court is that he saw you as his boss.
Which is hysterical. You know, and my attorney, you know, tried to and did successfully kind of negate that. I was not David Wildstein's boss. David Wildstein had a history with the governor that went back to, I think they were 15 when they started their friendship.
The governor has downplayed that.
Right, because David was a statistician and, you know, the governor was the baseball player, whatever. But, you know, for me, David had, as did the others at the Port Authority, it was almost like carte blanche. I mean, the Port Authority was like a separate entity unto himself. And the governor put some pretty close people there of his. And it's an interesting entity in and of itself, the Port Authority, before Bridgegate, and I think it remains. But no, I couldn't be David Wildstein's boss if I couldn't. I mean, it's absurd.
What do you think about the fact that he was not sentenced to any prison?
He made a deal. But he has to put his head on the pillow every night.
Does that bother you?
That he lied?
That he's not going to prison and you are?
Sure. But he made a deal. So I could have made a deal, but I would have had to lie. So do you lie and take the easy way out, which is what he did? Or do you tell the truth and fight this? And that's what I've done. So my kids know, and that's the only people I care about, are my 4 children. They know we don't give up, we don't give in, and we fight for the truth. So here I am. Is it fair? No.
How old are your kids?
Mary Kate is 22. Connor is 19. Liam is almost 16. And my baby, Amory, is 12 and a half.
How has this whole experience for your family changed them and the way they've grown up?
Well, there's a family joke, like they liked me as a working mom better than a stay-at-home mom. But, you know, and you try to make light of certain things just because otherwise all you do is cry. I would say my kids are stronger as a result, but I wish this wasn't how they became stronger. I think they're all a little bit more cautious, definitely with text messaging and emails. That's been like a lesson, but I think that's a lesson for everybody in today's day and age. It changes the dynamics. I mean, families can have struggles every single day, but they're not on the front page of the paper, and you're not making breakfast or making waffles and mom's on the TV. So we've been through some pretty tough stuff in our family. But this, because of the public nature of it, has been more difficult, and they know how much I love my job. They also spent time with the governor and his family. So we were a part of that world, and, you know, that was taken in a heartbeat. So I think they've learned a lot more, but they've also lost a lot too. I mean, people can be mean. I mean, there's kids say things whether we know them or not, and that's been tough.
Does it concern you that this will impact personal relationships because they're suspicious or cautious or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, we all have trust issues now, you know, for 100 different reasons, but mostly because of this. I hope not. I hope that they, you know, my job is to give them the strongest sense of self that they can have. I hope that they one day look back and say, Mom did the right thing, as hard as it was. And I hope it makes them better, you know, friends, partners, whatever it is in their lives. And you know, it's a horrible way to learn, but I'm glad they learned it now and not at 40-something years old like I did.
You touched upon it. What are the lessons for them from this whole saga?
their mom was a little naive at the time. I trusted everybody. I believed everybody liked me as much as I liked them. I think there's a cautiousness that I've tried to encourage with them, a hesitation. Don't hit send unless you are saying what you mean, and mean what you say. I think that it's just it's tenacity. It's strength. I never want them to give in to what's easy. And as hard as that, as hard as the last 5.5 years have been, if they walk away being stronger young people in a world that's really tough, different than when we grew up, I'm okay.
When you take a step back and look at what you're facing now, how you're looking at 13 months of prison, how do you process that? How do you deal with that?
I think I'm a little bit in shock. I'm not sure you ever prepare or can prepare for it. I'm trying to compartmentalize a little bit. I don't know, and each day is one day closer to that, and it's hard not to let the kids see it get to me, and so I do a lot of my crying at night, and a lot of my crying after they leave for school. The older two are away at college, which is good, but they know me like a book. So it's just trying to enjoy the kids, enjoy our family and our friends, and just know that as much as the last 5.5 years have been so difficult, I wouldn't go back and change anything.
You're here talking with us. You've done other interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
I think that it was difficult when you're testifying for 4.5 days. I think I was on the stand. And reporters were there, but there's no cameras in the courtroom. I think I've been defined by this in a manner that's not been fair. Not necessarily by reporters. It started, with the 2-hour press conference, and then the master report. And then, so I think I would like people to kind of know who I am and that I'm a real human and that I'm not this calculated person that I was portrayed to be, or heartbroken, lovelorn, whatever. But also because I can now. I'm going to prison for something I didn't do. And there are others who were involved more deeply than I, who are going on with their lives, and I've lost almost everything.
I just want to ask you one more thing. You've talked about the fact that you haven't been able to work.
Correct.
How have you lived?
I have amazing angels in my life. Family and friends have helped. I live on gift cards. An anonymous family set up an account at one of the markets in town so I can get cold cuts and vegetables for the kids. There are true angels, and I don't like asking for help, and I haven't really had to ask. People have just been so kind, and I'm very blessed.
What is it like to be on the receiving end of that?
I don't do that well. I'd rather be the giver than the taker. So for me, it's, I fight with a lot of my girlfriends a lot because they always, want to be doing, and I push them away and then I need them. But it's been tough. It's been tough. I'm a better gift giver than I am receiver.
Bridget Kelly, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me, Peter.